Chapter 17. Facing the Truth. And then I blew a giant hole in the castle's walls and set the griffin free. Salazar laughed as he lay there on his back and stared at the sky. Rowena, you would have killed me, Helga, you would have had to somehow bring me back to life, and Godric, you would have laughed and probably helped. It was a clear spring day, and Salazar was laying in the grassy clearing where he had met with Nicholas and Perinel. He hadn't been able to come and visit as much as he had wanted to, but today was Sunday, and he took a moment to get away from all the chaos. Hermione was in full-fledged panic mode, seeing as exams were right around the corner. She and Salazar had pulled together some of their year mates and formed study groups. He was surprised that some of the Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws were willing to join, but they were gladly taking advantage of the opportunity. The only Slytherins in the group were him and Blaise, because no one else would join the Mudbloods and Blood Traitors. As for the Gryffindors, it was only Hermione, Neville, Dean Thomas, and Parvati Patil. Come to find out, Minerva's talk with Ron hadn't sunk in. He had just been too scared to do anything for a while, and so, he didn't want to study with greasy Slytherins. His best friend, Seamus Finnegan, felt much the same way, and the other Gryffindor girls could care less about studying. Salazar sighed as he continued to lay there. You would all be proud of me though. I have made friends with a Mulborn and she's a Gryffindor, he said, looking at Godric's cave. Also, I have befriended another Gryffindor who Helga would love to get her hands on because he loves herbology. I have befriended 2 more Gryffindors who are brilliant pranksters. Rowena, you would hate them simply because they could give Godric and I a run for our galleons, he said with a chuckle. Then he smiled softly. I say friends because I think that's what they are. Granted, they are children, but they are very bright children. None of them are my best buddies, because I do want to keep that line drawn, but I think it's all right to call them friends. It's been so long since I've had so many. Nicholas, Perinel, the Potters, and another that I can't mention due to an unbreakable vow, are the only other ones. I love to teach the children new things. Hermione is a brilliant little girl and I always wonder why she didn't end up in Ravenclaw, but I keep forgetting to ask her that. Neville was shy at first, but he came out of his shell and is a wonderful lad, very polite and caring. Fred and George are the only ones that know the truth about me, but they don't care about that. They love to hear stories about the pranks Godric and I pulled, and dare I have the audacity to say, I think they may even look up to me. Blaise wasn't my friend at first, and quite frankly, he's my only Slytherin friend, but that's okay I suppose. Seeing that I am portraying Slytherin's archenemy, I guess it's to be expected, he said with another sad smile. I've also been teaching the children Parseltongue. They have enjoyed it immensely and can understand it fluently now. I've also been teaching Severus as well, but his lessons are sporadic at best, because we have to find time around our schedules. Not to mention, find ways to be secretive about it, seeing as he's supposed to hate me. We have plans to continue over the summer though. But, I suppose I've bored you all with the retelling of this past year, so I will leave you in peace. I do want to say though, Dumbledore will have a lot to answer for, and my goal is to have him answer for some of the wrongs he has committed. In the short term though, I need to take care of that blasted boy who fancies himself my heir. While that may be true, I am none too pleased with him, and Tom Riddle will be answering to me for what he has done, he said with a scowl, but then his face softened and he smiled again. I love you all, and I miss you so much, he continued, as he gazed sadly at the graves. I wish I hadn't done what I did, and I regret it terribly. I was selfish and I should not have left you all. Godric, I am so sorry I didn't listen to you. You were right, and I was wrong. I hope that you know that, and I hope that you can forgive me. I must go though. Hermione has probably sent out the hunting party for me, but I'll come back another time, so for now, goodbye my friends. He finished, and then he stood up and quietly headed back towards the castle. Salazar was rounding the corner and heading towards the library when Hermione burst out of said library. She looked like a frazzled mess. Her hair was frizzed out, she had an ink stain on her nose, and she was carrying a small stack of parchment in one of her hands. However, she stopped in mid-stride, and threw her hands up in the air when she caught sight of him. "There you are!" she exclaimed, and proceeded to drag him towards the library. "I was headed that way, Hermione. You don't have to drag me." He chuckled. She let go of him and sighed. "I'm sorry, I'm just so stuck," she said, throwing her hands up again in frustration. Salazar laughed as he followed her to one of the back tables. The study group was sitting there and they all looked up and grinned when they approached. "That was quick," Blaise whispered. "I found him in the corridor," Hermione whispered back, and then she got that frazzled look on her face again and started talking really fast. "Okay, now that Harry is here, we can start properly. Dean, you need to quiz Neville in charms, and that won't work. Parvati needs to quiz Neville in charms. Dean can go over." "Hermione, stop," Salazar said, giving her an amused grin. "Breathe. Just breathe," he said, taking in a deep breath, as if to show her how. "But we have to." "I know," he interrupted her. "But you also have to realize that a lot of studying has to be done alone as well. One cannot learn if someone keeps hounding them. When it comes to memorization, then it's time for partners. Otherwise, no one will learn a thing. But grades are." "I know," he said again. "Good marks are extremely important, and I don't deny that. You just have to breathe." "Yeah, in and out, in and out." Justin Finch Fletchley, a Melbourne Hufflepuff said. She shot him a dirty look, and then laid her head on the table. "You guys are right. I'm sorry. I'm just so worried that I will fail everything." "Well, unless you're Crabbe or Goyle, I don't think you have to worry about that," Blaise said. "Okay, let's not do that," Salazar said sternly. "But no, you won't fail everything. You just need to calm down and get focused, because honestly, I'm not above spiking your pumpkin juice with a calming draught." She looked at him with wide eyes. "You wouldn't." "I would," he answered with a grin. "He is a Slytherin," Terry Boots said with a laugh. "That's right. I'm a sneaky, slimy, stinking, sodding, slippery Slytherin serpent," he said with a grin. "But at least I warned you first." "True," Hannah Abbott said with a giggle. "But you forgot Git." "That too," Salazar said, as Blaise and Neville snorted. "Would you really spike my juice?" Hermione asked. "No, but I can threaten it," he said honestly. "I would never spike your juice without your knowledge. However, I would say, Hermione, I'm going to put this calming draught in your juice, and then I would make you drink it." "Because he is a Slytherin," Neville laughed. She glared at both Salazar and Neville, but then she giggled. "I don't think you really would, but I do understand your point. I just need you guys to keep reminding me to calm down." "We promise," they all chorused, and then the whole table began giggling. Salazar just laughed and shook his head as they began to study. It was only the middle of April and exams were still a month away, but he was delighted, and a bit amused, by the children's willingness to study. The day after Hermione's near breakdown in the library, Salazar received a letter from Nicholas saying that he would be arriving in 2 weeks' time. Well, those 2 weeks had passed, and now Salazar was at dinner, and he had been glancing at the doors every so often. Blaise was thankfully distracted by a conversation with Nora, so he didn't notice. He had warned Poppy, Severus, Minerva, and the twins about Nicholas's arrival, so they were also expecting it. From where Salazar was sitting though, Minerva looked like she was about to burst with anticipation. They didn't have to wait long though. The doors to the great hall flew open, and both Nicholas and Perenelle walked in briskly. Albus sat there stunned, and just stared at them with his mouth open. Perenelle glared at him, but Nicholas began to speak loudly. "Albus, I am very sorry to interrupt your dinner, but I am a very busy man and don't have much time. You refuse to give me answers, so Perenelle and I have come to demand them. Get up, young man, and let's go to your office to have a chat." Nicholas I can assure. "I'm done with your assurances, Albus. I want real answers, and you will give them to me. Bring with you who you must, but come along. I'm not getting any younger just standing here." Salazar was hysterically laughing internally, but he tried not to let it show on his face. Albus's expression was priceless as he stood there gaping at Nicholas. Perenelle was still glaring daggers at him, and that only made Salazar want to laugh even harder. Albus sighed in defeat, but then he smiled at Nicholas. "Very well. Severus, Minerva, Pomona, Phileas, and Quirinus, will you all please follow me?" "Of course, Albus," Minerva said, practically jumping out of her seat. Salazar rolled his eyes though. He didn't see the need for all of them to go, but at least Severus was going as well, just in case Voldemort tried anything. What made him nervous though, was that he had no idea what Nicholas and Perenelle were going to do. "I'm sorry, Albus, but you have left me no choice. I want to see my stone. I want to see the spells that are protecting it. You have refused me such knowledge with something that is my own property. Perenelle and mine's very lives depend on that stone. I want to see it," Nicholas demanded. "All right, but I assure you that it is well protected," Albus answered. "We will be the judge of that," Perenelle answered in a haughty tone. They made their way up to the third-floor corridor, and stopped just at the trapdoor. Nicholas reached down but Severus stopped him. "Forgive me, Mr. Flamel, but that trapdoor electrocutes anyone who tries to open it." "Is that so?" Nicholas asked, and they all nodded. "Well, can someone remove the spell?" "We have tried," Albus said. "We can't remove it." Perenelle raised an eyebrow at him. "Come again, Albus. What do you mean, you have tried and cannot remove it?" Albus shifted around uncomfortably. "Someone placed this spell here. Someone who I am unaware of." "Voldemort?" Nicholas asked. "No, I do not think so," Albus answered. "He has not even been here." "Nicholas, have you ever heard of a spell that can electrocute people?" Perenelle asked. "I have, but I have to make sure it's the same spell, my dear. Who here can describe it to me?" he asked, as he looked around the group. Minerva spoke up and told them what happened to Albus when he tried to touch the door handle, and Severus tried not to laugh at the memory of it all. "Very good. Yes, that it is the very one," Nicholas said, and he waved his wand over the trapdoor. The trapdoor glowed red, then blue, then a brilliant orange before a very faint pop was heard. He reached down and opened the trapdoor without any problems and peered into the darkness below. "What's next?" he asked, looking right at Albus. "Now we have to jump into the trapdoor," Professor Sprout said anxiously. "My devil's snare is next, so perhaps I should go first." "Are you sure, madam?" Perenelle asked kindly. "There are plenty of strong lads standing here that I'm sure will be glad to go in your stead. In fact, Albus, I think you should go." Professor Sprout blushed a deep red. "No, it is all right. I can go." "Albus, I insist," Perenelle said with a stern glare, and he sighed loudly. "It's all right, Pomona, I'll go." Professor Sprout nodded awkwardly and everyone watched as Albus jumped into the hole. They heard him land, but then a bright orange glow began emanating from the darkness. A moment later, Albus called up to them. "It's a long drop, but aim for the middle. I didn't destroy it all." One by one they all gently landed beside him by slowing their own descent, and then they began making their way towards the next room. Professor Flitwick cleared his throat, and opened the door. When they all walked in, They looked up and noticed that high above their heads keys with wings were flittering around. They are charmed and cannot be vanished or summoned. The only way to get the real key is to catch it on the broom," he said, and pointed to a shoddy-looking broom that was hovering in the corner. "The real key is the old one," he added. "Albus, I do believe you should be the one to get it," Perenelle said in an off-handed way. Then she turned to Minerva. "It's very chilly down here. Are you cold as well, madam?" Minerva smiled and nodded, but chose not to say anything for fear of laughing out loud, while Albus glared at Perenelle for suggesting that he be the one to get it. "Albus, I would appreciate it if you didn't glare at my wife in such a fashion. You're young enough to fly around on that broom, so get to it. I want to see my stone sometime before this century ends," Nicholas said with a hint of anger. Albus sighed again, and for the next 45 minutes they watched with somewhat amused expressions as Albus flew around on the shoddy old broom. When he finally caught the key, he landed looking somewhat winded and very annoyed. He unlocked the door, and they once again gathered to look at the next protection. "You have to play your way across the room, and then the door can be opened," Minerva said as they all stared at the giant chessboard. "Albus, I hear you're good at chess," Perenelle said pointedly. "He is very good at chess, my dear. He has beaten me hundreds of times," Nicholas said happily, as Albus glared at them. "Don't think I don't know what you two are up to," he said with a hint of anger in his voice. "You want me to go through all this because I wouldn't tell you anything." "We never pretended it was anything otherwise," Nicholas said calmly. "You had ample opportunity to tell us all of this before, and you chose not to. You Albus, not your staff, but you were charged with protecting the stone, and so far, I'm not impressed. A first year can make their way through these so-called protections. Please do not think that we speak badly about any of you," Perenelle said kindly, as she looked around the rest of them. "Nicholas is right, it was up to Albus to protect the stone. Well, Albus, off you go. Get us through the next door." Albus glared at them, as the rest of the staff either tried to hide their amusement or looked around nervously, but the next 20 minutes saw Albus nearly get crushed by the giant chess pieces. Finally though, they were able to move forward. When they got to the next door, Quirrell took charge. I am rather gifted with trolls, and mine is the next one. It's a tea-troll. I think Albus can handle it," Perenelle said. "We will all wait here." With muttered obscenities, Albus blasted the door off its hinges and cast several blasting curses at the troll, which ended up killing it when one of the curses hit the troll's head. Perenelle chuckled at Albus's obvious annoyance, and glanced at her husband. "Salazar would love this," she thought. "Indeed, my dear, but I fear he would have given us way because he would have been laughing so hard." "What do we do about Voldemort?" she asked. "Once I reveal that the stone is a fake, I would like for you to stand in a safe spot just in case he decides to get angry. Salazar has told Severus and the Minerva where the tunnel for the Room of Requirement is. He had to remake the tunnel, but Minerva and Severus know where it is. I want you to go with them if things turn ugly." "What about you?" "I will be all right. I'm sure that between myself and Albus that we can contain him." Perenelle nodded as they all made their way towards the next room, and that's when Severus spoke up. "It's a logic puzzle, and I must warn you that flames will appear in both doorways when we all cross the threshold, so don't be alarmed. Also, the bottles are charmed to refill themselves, so we will all have to take a sip of the correct potion." Perenelle looked at Albus expectantly, and he visibly gritted his teeth as he snarled at her. Nicholas made a move towards his wand, but Perenelle stepped between them. "It's fine, Nicholas. I feel we are coming to the end." Nicholas stowed his wand, but didn't take his eyes off Albus. "Very well, my dear. As you wish." Albus glared at them, but turned and stalked through the doorway, as the others followed along behind him. purple flames blocked the door they had just come through, but black flames sprang up in the doorway that led into the final chamber. It only took Albus a minute or two to work out the logic puzzle though, and pretty soon they were standing in the last chamber, and the mirror of Erised stood before them. "This is the final protection. I charmed the mirror and placed the stone within it," he said in a cold voice. "Let me see," Nicholas simply stated. Albus sighed again, stepped in front of the mirror, and after a moment he handed the stone to Nicholas, who smiled brightly and took it from him. Yes, very good. Excellent," he said. Then he looked at Perenelle. "It is a very good copy." "Really?" Perenelle asked with a bit of excitement. "Let me hold it." She studied it closely for a few short moments, then she nodded. "Indeed. This is an excellent copy. He did a very good job." "Yes, he did." "What are you talking about?" Albus asked suddenly, looking between the both of them in shock. "Oh, this?" Nicholas asked, taking the stone from Perenelle and tossing it over his shoulder, and it hit the floor with a loud clatter. "Is a fake. A copy. You see, Albus, when Perenelle and I learned of your protections we were very alarmed because my spy told me that you were putting innocent children in danger. I asked my spy, who is a very good friend of mine and someone I trust completely, to get my stone any way he could. When you told me Voldemort was after my stone, I gave it to you to protect. I thought you would hide it in your office under a Fidelius charm, or have Fawkes take it somewhere and hide it. I never expected a Cerberus, and then later a Griffin, to be brought into a school full of children. You used us, and our stone, to lure Voldemort here. Thankfully Voldemort never showed up. But isn't it interesting that of all this would happen in the very same year that Harry Potter came to Hogwarts? You put our very lives in danger because of your need to test an 11-year-old child," Perenelle said angrily, as she glared at a still stunned Albus. "For years our stone has been safe under real protections, enchantments, layers of wards, and other unpleasant things, but you said it was in danger, so we trusted you, and clearly, that was a mistake." "Indeed it was, my dear," Nicholas confirmed. "You see, Albus, we have had the real stone in our possession since Halloween. My spy has been here the whole time keeping me updated on things, and by listening and paying attention to your comings and goings, he was able to learn a lot of things. He told me that Harry Potter is a Slytherin, and a very fine-mannered young man and very powerful. Thankfully he is also not an idiot because he did not fall for your manipulations. You, Albus, are not the only one in this school who can understand Parseltongue. Harry Potter loves to confide in that snake of his. Indeed. He saw through all of your manipulations, and is a true Slytherin through and through," Perenelle said with a haughty tilt of her head, as she looked down her nose at Albus. "Albus, is all of this true? Have you purposely placed the only son of James and Lily in danger? Would you really concoct a stupid plan like this and try to lure who of all people here? Where there are innocent children?" Minerva shouted in anger. "This is a school, Albus. Not a playground for you to test your wild ideas. If I wasn't worried about the children, I would resign." The rest of the staff, minus Squirrel who looked to be in too much pain to speak, was glaring at Albus. Severus though, looked unreadable as always, but he was silently cheering on his Gryffindor partner in crime. "You wouldn't be the only one to resign, Minerva," Pomona said, glaring at the still stunned and speechless headmaster, but then she turned to the Flamels. "Sir, madam, you have my deepest apologies for my role that I played in this nonsense. Had I known all of this, I wouldn't have had anything to do with it." "Well said, Pomona," Flitwick said. "Goblins have a word for people like you, Albus, but out of the small amount of respect that I still hold for you, I won't say it. However, I will say that the Board of Governors should hear about this nonsense. As much as I dislike Lucius Malfoy and would hate to have to speak with him, I'm sure he would have a field day." At the mention of the Board of Governors, Albus finally found his voice. Now Phileas, there is no need for that. I realize now how wrong I was. See that it doesn't happen again, Albus, because I will be keeping a close eye on you, as will my spy, who by the way, has no problems staying here to babysit you. Now, if someone would be so kind as to show us the way out, we need to be going," Nicholas said, turning quickly towards the door. "Also Albus, I'm afraid this marks the end of our friendship." "Nicholas, what is the mull term for the trinkets that mulls keep on their desks?" Perenelle asked. "I believe you are thinking of a paperweight, my dear," he answered. Yes, that is it." "Here Albus," she said, as she picked up the fake stone and tossed it at him. "Keep this paperweight as a reminder of us." Albus fumbled it slightly as he grabbed it out of the air, but with a solemn sigh, he followed the group out of the underground chambers and back into the main part of the castle. The next day the whole school was buzzing about the apparent suicide of Professor Quirrell. Hagrid found him on the ground under the astronomy tower, and rumor had it he had become tired of everyone mocking him and his teaching methods. Salazar, Minerva, Poppy, and Severus sat down and talked about it, and after Salazar witnessed the memory of what happened in the underground chambers, they all came to the conclusion that Voldemort was so angry that he had been set up by Albus, and that the stone he had been chasing all year was a fake, that he forced Quirrell to jump. They also believed that Voldemort fled from the man's body just before he landed in order to keep Quirrell from saving himself. Severus agreed that it would be something that Voldemort would do. Defense classes were cancelled, but Albus sat with each class as they took the exams Quirrell had already prepared. Exams were slightly stressful for Salazar, but not because he was worried about his grades. He just wanted the children to do well. Hermione fretted the entire week after they had taken the exams though, and was nearly at her bursting point when the results came back. No one was surprised that she had asked every one of them though. Salazar was also pleased to see that all those that had joined their study group got an A or better. Neville received an E on everything but potions, which he got an A in, but that was only because he was still slightly afraid of Severus. Blaise did really good as well, and received an O or an E in all his classes. Salazar was really proud of them for doing so well. As for Nora's exam results though, she said that their passing grade was not being beaten. The last week of school was a quiet one, and Salazar spent his blissfully pain-free days sitting on the ground in a clearing talking to Godric, Rowena, and Helga. He told them everything that happened with Dumbledore and the Flamels, and said it was the funniest thing he had ever seen. He mentioned that Nicholas and Perenelle always seem to know what the other is thinking and they always know how to play off of each other. He told his friends that he had been trying to figure out how they do it for centuries, but he had never come close, or so the Flamels had told him. Salazar had been making it a point not make eye contact or even look at Albus, and to avoid the man altogether, but luck was not on his side the day before school ended. Severus had told him that Albus wanted to see him in his office, so they used a few shortcuts to make their way towards the headmaster's office. When they got there, Severus stood in his usual dark corner and Salazar sat down in one of the squashy chairs that sat in front of Dumbledore's desk. "Harry, do you know why I called you here this evening?" Albus asked gently. Salazar was immediately on his guard because if Albus was playing nice, it meant he wanted something. "No sir," he answered truthfully, and a bit curiously. "I wanted to talk to you about your living arrangements. I know that you spent time at the Leaky Cauldron last year after you got your letter, but I must ask you not to do that this year. Your aunt and uncle have agreed to take you for the summer. I have spoken with them, and they have assured me that you will have a proper room and meals." "I'm sorry sir, but I'm not going back to that house. Ever. I can take care of myself. I've pretty much done that all my life, and I can manage for the next 2 months. Harry, I'm afraid that I must insist. You see, when your mother died to protect you, she did something very remarkable. She protected you with love. That is why you survived the killing curse all those years ago. Your Aunt Petunia is your mother's sister, and therefore has that connection with you and your mother. Through your aunt, your mother's blood still protects you, and as long as you remain in your aunt's house Voldemort cannot get to you, and you will be safe. Well, that explains the blood wards, Salazar thought. Too bad they are useless. Safe? Salazar laughed. Hardly. My so-called family hate me. I am no safer than I would be living with Voldemort. I'm sorry, Headmaster, but I'll be fine on my own. But Harry, you see, I placed a blood bonding charm on your relative's house. It not only keeps you safe, but your family as well. It works off of love, and ties back into your mother's sacrifice. As long as you can still call their house home, you will all be safe. I don't care. They hate me, and I hate them. There is no love towards me in that house, and I'm guessing that makes your blood bonding charm useless. You have seen the evidence of what they have done to me. I have told you how they treated me. I'm not going back to that house, and I'm sorry to say, you can't make me. Harry, I'm afraid I must insist. And I'm afraid I must decline. You are not my guardian, you are my headmaster. When I am not under this roof, what happens to me is not your concern. I will return to school next year, but I will not go back to Privet Drive. Very well, as you wish, Dumbledore said with a sigh. Off you go then. Severus, will you remain behind, please? Of course, Headmaster, he answered, giving Salazar a stern glare as he walked by him. The only thing Salazar could think of as he made his way back to the common room was that had been way too easy. Hey Harry, Fred and I were wondering if we could talk to you, so can you come here for a moment? George asked, as he poked his head into the train compartment that Hermione, Neville, Salazar, and Blaise were sharing. He looked up at them a bit startled, but then he nodded and followed them into one of the few empty compartments and sat down. All right, what has you two so secretive? Salazar asked with a grin as he studied the boys closely. Fred laughed. Well, we know it's a long shot, seeing as you're ancient and full of authority and all, but we were wondering if you knew of a way to remove the trace. You know, the one they place on underage wizards. Salazar grinned at them, then he burst out laughing. And you think calling me ancient is going to make me help you? He teased. I do know the way to avoid the trace, but I'm afraid you have already been charmed for the upcoming summer. However, since you will be 15 next summer and going into your 5th year, I will tell you how to avoid it, if you promise me you will be responsible with the privilege. Oh, and also not tell your mother. The twins laughed. We promise that we will hide it as best as we can, be responsible, and we certainly won't tell our mum, they said together, as they raised their hands in a mock oath. Very well, Salazar said with a chuckle. You know that piece of paper your head of house gives to you at the end of the year that reminds you not to use magic away from school during the summer? Do you know how your head of house stands there in the common room to make sure everyone opens it up and reads it? Yeah, they chorused. Next year don't open it and read it, he said. It's simple really. When the folded piece of parchment is open and read, the charm sticks to you and the ministry will be able to trace you. The charm stays on you and only breaks when you enter the gates of Hogwarts for your next school year, or you turn 17. I tell you this in confidence and ask that you not tell anyone. The truth about that piece of parchment is not very well known, otherwise we would have scores of underage witches and wizards using magic in places where they shouldn't. We promise, they said with sincere nods. Very well, now you have to prank me, Salazar said. What? Fred asked in astonishment. You have to prank me so that I have a cover story on why you wanted to talk to me alone. They burst out laughing, and by the time Salazar left the compartment, his black robes had been permanently changed into half red and half gold for Gryffindor, and his hair had been charmed to be half green and half silver for Slytherin. Apparently this was a combination of two marauder pranks. When they reached the platform at King's Cross, Salazar noticed that Severus was there, But he didn't have to wait long to find out why. As soon as Salazar stepped off the train, Severus yelled at him. "Potter! Get over here now!" he snapped. Everyone else looked at him curiously and some even gave him sympathetic looks, but Salazar just shook his head, sighed, and headed over to him. "Seeing as you think you can run around the wizarding world on your own, the headmaster has deemed it my burden to make sure you are escorted beyond the barrier and delivered to your relatives." Salazar raised an eyebrow and then rolled his eyes. "I understand, Professor, but will you give me a moment to scribble a note to the headmaster?" "Make it quick," he said with a sneer. Salazar scribbled a quick note, and then he and Severus walked through the barrier, where Severus watched Vernon grab Harry Potter none too gently, and steer him towards the waiting car. When Severus was sure that no one was watching, he unfolded the crumpled-up piece of parchment that Salazar had given him. "Obviously do not give this to Albus. Remember this address and destroy this note after you read it. The only way to get into my flat is to operate or arrive by Portk. Salazar Slytherin lives at number 93 diagonally. See you tomorrow."
Hey guys, what's going on? Thank you so much for watching today's episode. If you guys want to watch more like it, please subscribe to my channel and become part of the video game fanfiction plot. And please leave a comment down below and hit that like button. If you guys have any suggestions on any stories you guys want me to read, don't hesitate. They're always welcome here in the video game fanfic plot. That also goes for video games. Until next time, goodbye!
I am going to stop right there. I do hope you enjoy this video. If you like to see more of me playing this game, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and leave a comment down below. Until next time.